Thank you so much for being here. It's my pleasure to be back in Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, city where I lived for 3 years, and part of my life is was spent here. I have beautiful moments of remembrance and memory in Philly, and to be here is really emotional for me. I'm going to introduce Eduardo. Eduardo is an Argentinian writer from Cordoba. The book that he's presenting tonight is called Patria del Viento, which will translate as wind country, wind homeland. Are you hearing me well? No. Or it's better than
not at all.
Okay, without the mic. Okay, so I was saying, better like this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so Eduardo is an Argentinian writer from Cordoba, which is a state in the middle of Argentina. He published his first book in 2010. It was called Creatures of Mandala, Criaturas del Mandala in Spanish. And this is his second book, which is called Patria del Viento, which would translate as Wind Homeland. So let's talk a little bit about Wind Homeland. What we're going to do is that I'm going to ask some questions to Eduardo, and then he'll have the opportunity to go deep in between the subjects that he wants to deal with in his book. Patria del Viento is basically it's a book that it's a short story book that tells stories about about this town, which used to be like a 50,000 people town in Argentina, and it gradually started shrinking. It started shrinking to a 40,000 people town, afterwards to a 30,000 people town, and nowadays it's like a 20,000 people town. There are several factors that have dealt with the shrinking of the town, and one of it is one of the most important one is political decisions. It used to be a very important town, a railway town, so people from all around the world came, like immigrants from all around the world came into this town, and it was a very prosperous, very important city in Argentina. But after there was, I think it was Menem, right, Edu, who like in the 80s, in the 90s, like he took some decisions in order for the train not to be as important as it was, in order to favor like the trucking companies. So the city started to lose its importance. Afterwards, and currently the city's been having the same mayor for 15 years, something which is like unbelievable. It's absolutely not democracy. So it's roads are opened like this, and you could see like working done from some years ago, and they've never closed it back again. It's really like left there like unattended. So like the title of the book it's very suggestive in the sense that like there's a wind that's going to blow the city away. So there's some very important topics about the book, dealing, for example, with immigrants, which is after all a subject that we can all relate to, living in the States, or like having come here as immigrants, or like or being descendants of people who came here. So there's actually two very pretty stories that deal with the theme of immigrants in the book, which are El pan de los Atalas, which would translate as the Atalas' bread, which actually it's very interesting. It's a very interesting story because it starts with a recipe, the recipe of a bread, and actually the story it's really moving and it's really interesting. So it's very innovative that you start with a recipe, Edu, and the other one is it's El último viaje de Malt, which would translate as the last of Malt's voyage, which tells the story of Eduardo's grandmother who went out from Turkey, escaping from the Turks. She was Armenian, and she went out escaping from the Turks. So, what can you tell us, Eduardo? It's very nice for actually it's incredible for me to be here with Eduardo. Actually this is the last presentation of a tour that we've been doing since almost a month ago, that started in Tucumán, Argentina. We went from Tucumán then to Frias, Santiago del Estero, afterwards to the Anfunes, which is actually the wind homeland, Patria del Viento, the Anfunes. Then we went to Cordoba, the capital city of Cordoba. We went we presented the book in the book fair of Buenos Aires, afterwards in the book fair of Bogota, and last week in the Colombian consulate in Manhattan. So please, Eduardo, tell us about these two stories and the way that immigration is embedded in them.
First of all, thank you all for coming. It's quite an accomplishment to, I'm from like Eduardo said, from a tiny little town. It's a little bit denigrated by corruption and oblivion nowadays. But it's quite an accomplishment to be here in America, in such a wonderful city, Philadelphia, in front of remarkable people like you, and thank you for coming and letting us share our subjects, our books, and to tell you all about them. Basically, I think that the best way to talk about the book is just to give it to somebody to read it. But since I'm not sure how far it will go, I'm going to talk about the book a little bit, and I'm going to talk about immigration, because it's one of the subjects that I decided to explore, because every single writer has its own subjects, and with Eduardo we share the name, the last name, and quite a few subjects as well. One of them is immigration, and immigration is something that it really has marked us, because all the anguish that the immigrants bring with them at the moment that they leave everything behind, it doesn't vanish, it doesn't just go away, but it stays in the future generations, and we are like the current generations, and my children will be like the future generations, and they will carry that anguish, that disruption, and that pain that the immigrants carry it with them at the moment that they came to either Colombia or Argentina, or I'm sure that many of you here are descendants from people abroad. But we're in the United States of America, it's founded by immigrants too, so I'm sure that is the case. So basically I have two stories. One of it, it's sort of, I would like to say it's humoristic, and the other one, it's a little bit more, the narrative voice is a little bit more serious. And the reason I did that is because the first one is an intimate story, because it's a bread recipe, as Eduardo said. My mother is a very good cook, and she also told me a lot of stories about immigrants and about her family, and I didn't want those stories to be lost. So I decided to include, the one that really caught my attention. I mean, she has quite a lot of stories, but this one, it's from the hometown that she and my father are from, which is Sadat, Syria. So basically, I talk about a little bit about this anguish of the immigrants, living, but also I do it in a humoristic way, because I think that also in that moment of pain, in that moment of isolation, and being far away from the ones you love, and in those times they didn't have any Facebook or email or all the networking that we have today. So it was quite different, to be an immigrant. Today you could be far away from your family, but you can talk to them like 5 or 10 times a day. So I try to find that piece of beauty in that small tragedy, which is, leaving all your family behind. And the other story, it's about my Armenian grandmother. I'm curious about this because, real good writers try not to talk about them or the families, or they try to make fiction. But I can assure you that these stories deserve to be written. And if I don't write those stories now, I'm afraid that I might never do that. So I thought it was a good opportunity, to leave all in, printed in the book. But I chose to write about my grandmother because she suffered, the same problem, but it was like 10 times worse. Because she ran away from the Turkish, killing the Armenian people between late 1800s until the early 1900s. There was a genocide. As you know, the Turkish people, Turkish government, Ottoman Empire, or the national identity is such a blurry thing. Believe me. Every time I write about it or I think about it, it's such an accidental thing that I am an Argentinian and Eduardo is a Colombian, and probably that any of you that are Americans. That I don't know who to blame. The Turkish, the Ottoman, the Turkomans, or whoever were living there at the time. But the fact is that 1.5 million Armenians died in agonizing pain. And my mother got to escape. But there was a love story in the middle, and also it was a good chance, to portray the beautiful city of Istanbul, and connect it to the wind homeland, which is the city I was born. People from a city, they're very proud because I might be the first artist who left the hometown and made it to America, which is like the mecca for all the artists in the world, and more so for writers of tiny little towns. So they're watching live, this presentation, and they must be wondering what the hell I'm saying, because most of them don't speak in English, but the ones that do, I want to say hello to them. Anyway, those are the two stories about the migration.
Okay, another of the very important topics of the book, as we had said, is corruption. And I think that this is something that we can relate to, like Latin Americans. Because unfortunately our Latin American countries, the politics, the politicians are quite corrupt. So you treat this theme in two stories, which is on the way to the traditional festival, is one, and the other one is An Unhappy World, which actually plays, there with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which would translate in Spanish like A Happy World. So this is like An Unhappy World. What can you tell us about corruption, what's done in your hometown, and how do artists at the end, deal with corruption, and how do they react towards corruption?
Well, in these two short stories, First one, there's a guy who is going to play the guitar, you know, to the Tradition Festival, which is the biggest festival in my hometown, which is a small festival, you know, but it's the biggest festival in the hometown. So basically, he carries his guitar and he's walking through the streets, and it was a good opportunity to show, you know, the town's streets and you know to show the people a little bit, to see that that now there is a big casino in you know, like, it's a big casino and there's no, and the people have no money to play, you know, to gamble. And you know, although they have no money, you can see all the bicycles, you know, in front of the casino with all the groceries bags, you know, and people, you know, being very unhappy, losing all the little money that they have. So that's the way the story starts. And then it goes through, you know, all the people, all the crowd, and you can see that there is a campaign. The mayor is advertising his image, like if he were a god, you know, using the people's funds. And I try to talk a little bit about that, but also I try to show the people that how, you know, things work. I felt the need of telling somebody out there, you know, in the crowd, through the book, that basically in South America things are very, very difficult, you know, for people, because they can't change. You know, artists, they're important, but at the same time they're underestimated. So it's like a paradox, because until you don't reach like the size of Vargas Llosa or Gabriel Garcia Marquez or whatever, they just would, you know, ignore you. And this is quite a difficult question, because we talked about this a lot of times, and that story ends up with the character, which is a little bit autobiographical, because I play the guitar and also I went to that festival to play the guitar at the same time. You know, goes into the stage and, you know, plays. You know, he plays the song for a regular crowd. But it was a good moment to talk about identity. Who are we? You know, the Argentinians. Do we know what Argentinians are? You know, Thomas, do you know what Argentinians are?
The Argentines are people whose forefathers immigrated from Europe.
Exactly.
That's basically, we descend from the ships.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you know, right?
Yeah.
Well, so this character is asking, you know, the statues, because basically they should know who we are. You know, they ask San Martin, which is a big, you know, prócer, hero, you know, foundation father. He asks, you know, the ghosts of the festival's founders also, and nobody can say who we are, you know. And well, that's one of the stories. The other one is a little bit heavier, and it's about it's set in the future, and it's a guy who's, because basically politics in Argentina. And I always say this to Eduardo, that people punish the wrong people, because basically, or justice punish the wrong people, because basically when everything starts crumbling down, is at the top of the levels, you know. And at the last level is the guy who, you know, just pulls the gun and kills somebody. That's the last of the levels, and probably the least responsible, you know. I think that the real killers, you know, they're wearing tie and a suit, and they're, you know, in the offices. That's how I perceive the reality over there. You know, the ones that steal the money, and then the ones that, you know, oblige all the people, you know, to do things that they don't want to do. Because nobody wants to kill anybody. Nobody wants to be a thief. But sometimes in Latin America and South America and places like I was born in, we have no choice. I mean, people have no choice, you know, sometimes. So basically, in that last story, the character makes a very how would you say? Makes a harsh decision for himself in order to save something, and it was written as a manifesto against corruption. But also you can find, you know, there's a love story between a father and a daughter.